You're listening to the REI Marketing Nerds Podcast, the leading resource for real estate investors who want to dominate their market online. Dan Barrett is the founder of AdWords Nerds, a high-tech digital agency focusing exclusively on helping real estate investors like you get more leads and deals online, outsmart your competition, and live a freer, more awesome life. And now, your host, Dan Barrett.
Hey guys, welcome back. You're listening to the second part of last week's episode. Let's jump back in.
So let's talk about sustainability in a general sense. Where do you think that real estate professionals are getting sustainability wrong or making mistakes in how they pursue it, right? I mean, it strikes me that you have this really key amount of insight into what makes this kind of project work and what makes this kind of project, just like you said, efficient. So what do you see as the common problems that we're making in real estate that we could perhaps fix?
I don't know that there is, I hate to characterize that as a mistake, because I think that anything that people are doing that is driving towards sustainability is generally a good thing. It comes from the reporting of it. And so if in your mind you do something that is sustainable and then you go to a community and report that you've done something, whatever it happens to be, and don't know what you don't know, and don't know that the people to whom you have just reported, let's say, interpreted what you said in a certain way, and they understand that you have made a claim of something green or sustainable, and then you didn't know, but it wasn't. And so there's a phrase going around, I should say going around, that is what most in the industry are trying to solve for today, and that is greenwashing. And so it comes from some exercise or initiative or program that was well-intentioned, and yet it fell short because of some lack of understanding along the way. And it isn't to say that it wasn't a move towards sustainability, because it was. It was the claims made that this is a sustainable thing and it means X, because there is some accepted definition of that. And so, right, I mean, the person moved in that direction, that's positive. They articulated it in a way that was inaccurate. That's negative. And that's right, that's greenwashing. And so the better we get at understanding sustainability in real estate and sustainability in businesses, and entities and equities, right? The less greenwashing there will be. Now, the SEC is going to jump, the Securities Exchange Commission is going to jump into that and fine you heavily for claims that are not accurate, that are greenwashing claims. And so now, and sometime in the second quarter, probably of next year, people are going to be very well tuned into being careful about, what they're saying and how they're saying it, what terms of art they're using in terms of science for that matter. But I think that, any move towards sustainability is a good move. The good news is we're in a world now where you have to know how to say what you've done, how to describe what you've done. You have to use the right words, and they have to mean the same thing to your listening audience. I'll jump from that into another part of what we're doing. And so I think it's key, and that is standardization. So I mentioned the SEC regulating green or sustainability claims, which they have already proposed to do last March. And so a year or so from then, that will be executable. And so I don't know how they can regulate something that isn't standardized. So they're right when they first announced it, there were all kinds of companies that popped up and started marketing saying, we can help you get ready for this new SEC regulated world that we're all going to live in. And they were all doing it differently. They're all doing, whatever their take was, that's what they came to market with. And again, so there's no standardization in the process. Even in ESG inequities, there are something like 130 different scoring agencies and rating frameworks. And, and they're all over the board. At the top 27 last week in Egypt, there was one of the best outcomes of that whole process was the call for consolidating some of these different frameworks and And that has started to happen amongst the major ones, and that's a global exercise. But standardization is something that we're working very hard on. And so as we're applying to real estate solely, and as we're the first, among the first, I think, to do that, and we feel like there's a great opportunity to really control the data, control the education, control the message. We're talking to universities around the country, and they're actually willing to form a consortium, which is highly unusual. Normally, they're very proprietary, very protective of their own kind of discoveries. And in this case, what they would not want to have happen is have UC Berkeley, which is the leading sustainability school in the country, come up with something that they don't know about, and they get not left behind by long, but they get left behind by a period of time. So they're willing to form this consortium, which is actually very cool, around sustainability and ESG. So all of that hopefully will lead to standardization of ESG data in the application of real estate. And, and further to your question now 20 minutes ago, to how the sustainability can be achieved in a standardized way.
So since the SEC, so we're recording this towards the end of 2022, right? So we have about another quarter and a half or whatever it is, right? Until that sort of SEC regulation theoretically come into play. But you mentioned this when we first talked, and I wrote it down and highlighted it, which is you can't regulate something that isn't standardized, or at least it seems very difficult to do so. Is there any sense in the industry of what they are going to land on, or if they're going to, I'm not exactly sure how it works. Do they just come out and say, here's what it means, and here's the official definition? I know that you guys are sort of pushing in that direction, but what is the mechanism by which that actually gets decided, or is that not clear?
I suspect it boils down, like everything else in life, to money. And not to be cynical, actually, I think it's a positive way of describing that. So one of the first groups that we've associated with is the Mortgage Bankers Association, the Mortgage Industry Standards and Measurement Organization, MISMO, is now moving towards regulating or requiring green mortgages. And so they have accepted all of our data elements. There are 4,000 S data elements that are under review as we speak. They have not addressed G yet. And again, if you're looking for governance instead of government, that's a hard one to kind of get your head around. But so Mortgage Bankers Association through MISMO is leading the effort to standardize green mortgages. And again, with the data included in green mortgages. And with that, then it will sell upstream, right, to the government-sponsored enterprise and the GSEs, the Fannie Mae's and the Freddie Macs and so forth, Ginnie Mae. And then when Ginnie Mae, for example, sells about $1 billion every month of mortgage bonds, mortgage-backed securities, and could sell 5, is what they've told us. So now, as you go from the Mortgage Bankers Association and the individual banks to the GSEs, then to the mortgage-backed securities, now you're on Wall Street, right? So now you come to the SEC's back door, front door for that matter, and so that, I think, is how that process unfolds. So if you have academia on one side, which we're working very hard on, and mortgage banking on the other, covered a pretty wide swath of kind of the fabric of America in many respects, right? So I think that is potentially, that at least is our kind of two-pronged approach to doing it. Is there a right way or a better way? I don't know, but that's what we've chosen to do, and it seems like it's headed in the right direction.
So I'm curious. It strikes me that you particularly are someone who aligns with and works with many different sort of parts of the economy, right? Like you have your work with MIT, you've done academic work in terms of, doing the research and exploring AI. You've got your direct connections to the real estate industry in terms of your clients. You've got, sort of the federal regulators. You've got, like you said, MISMO, for example, or companies or groups that are representing different parts of the economy. You have all these different sort of stakeholders that you have to kind of interpolate between, right? I'm curious, has that been difficult? I think a lot of people assume that there are these walls between, for example, academia and the government and, industry, and that those people don't tend to communicate particularly well. I'm curious what your experience has been. Has it been difficult? Has it been easier than expected? And what do you think do you think that is necessary in order to achieve the kind of thing that you are trying to achieve?
That's a terrific question, in that ESG is the interconnectivity of all things. And at kind of the end of the day, it really is that, which is to say that everybody's on a sustainability journey is one fairly finite, kind of limited way of describing that. ESG, though, I mean, environmental, social, that's government. Now, it truly is kind of everything there is to think about. Making it measurable is really what it boils down to make it meaningful or material. Materiality is one of the biggest kind of benchmarks of ESG. And one of the problems also with ESG is that what's material to you may not be material to me. And so if you want your ESG score to reflect what is material to you, and we get these disconnects across 130 different frameworks, right? That is a problem. In the end, it's a bit like it's still a move towards sustainability. That's still a positive. There's still a lot of dysfunction in that, but on balance, right? I mean, that's a positive direction to be going. So does it take all aspects of that? I think so, because you don't want this to be the tree hugger group, and therefore, they can be easily dismissed, or you don't want it to be Wall Street. It can be easily dismissed.
Right.
You want it to resonate with people. And so on some level, it probably does. And again, the standardization is not just simply standardizing data, it's standardizing the language to some extent. So at least we all agree on what we're talking about. And if we can do that, that can then come back to AI, the natural language processing, to be able to hear those words and put them in the same place. So I'm not sure that answers your question necessarily, but that's
does.
My take on that.
Yeah, I think it's really interesting, right? Because I have always kind of viewed, sort of academia, industry, business, or, governance or whatever to be almost like different cultures and have different sort of linguistic, mechanisms and sort of structures. And it can be hard to go between those. And it strikes me that you guys have done that really well. And that's part of what makes what you do so interesting and impactful, right? It's you have these different pieces from all these different worlds. One of the things I wrote down when we met before we recorded the show, we got to know each other a little bit. One of the things I wrote down that you said, I think we were talking about core values or sort of the values behind the business. And you said that in terms of E3SG, our objective is to save the planet, which is a pretty big objection to have, right?
Want to find motivated seller leads online, but don't know where to start? Download our free Motivated Seller Keyword Report today. AdWords nerds have spent over $5 million this year researching the most profitable keywords for finding motivated seller leads. And you can grab these exact keywords when you download our report at www.adwordsnerds.com/keywords.
I'm curious, you could take this question wherever you like. It's a broad one. How do you think about having a mission-driven business? Or do you think of yourself as having a mission-driven business? And how does that affect the decisions you make day in and day out?
I call it purpose-driven. It's the same idea. I don't know that we're mission critical, for example, so I'm kind of drawing a little bit of a differentiation.
Sure.
I love it. Right. I'm at a point in my life where I want to be transformational. I feel like I have accumulated a network and a knowledge base and an ability to do what we're doing. So it doesn't mean that I know all about AI or I know that, right? I mean, but I know who does, and we are having a great time doing it. It is fun. It is important. It does need to happen. We haven't talked at all about climate change or climate risk, but it's part of it. It goes to Larry Fink's letter in 2018, right, when he talked about it. And I was talking about it the other day to somebody that no matter what you think about climate change, you have to acknowledge climate risk. So if somebody else is going to bake in their feelings about climate change, right, to whatever economic decisions that they're making, again, it doesn't matter what you think about it. The risk is real. And so you have to address that. So that to me it's just one, it's not even a very good example, but it is an example of, there's some reality to this. There's some urgency to this. I have grandchildren, I want to get it right for them. And that's a great driver. My brother-in-law and I were talking the other day at my daughter's wedding about
I didn't know that. That's awesome.
It was huge. I had two of them this year, actually.
Wow.
You'll shoot me now, but it was. But we were talking about. I said, every night I find myself, going to bed earlier and earlier, and at 3:00 I wake up and I've just solved whatever I was noodling, And he said, "Yeah, that's pie time. Pie time is 3:14, right, or 3.14, whatever it is." So at 3:14, I'm up and solving, whatever the issues are. And how cool is that? I'm jacked to get going. Every day starts with some, I mentioned to you before we came on air, the very cool thing that I'm working on this morning is just kind of one thing after another. And it's because of the interconnectivity of all these different things. It's new and different, but they all relate. And it's easy to pull. And you don't ask me a question and I'll give you 6 different pieces of the answer, right? Partly because that is sort of the way it flows.
Yeah. I think it's really fascinating, right? Because there are certain people I have on the show. They're always very interesting. I love everyone that I have on the show, but there are people where their passion for what they do is very palpable. And I think with you, it is absolutely the case, right? You can tell how important it is to you and how deep of a field it is. And I think that just really comes across. We're coming up on time and I don't want to keep you too late. I did want to ask you this because I think you are definitely one of the deeper thinkers I've ever had on the show. I find your viewpoint really fascinating. So I'm going to ask you sort of a weird question, which is, give me something that you have read that has had a massive impact on your life that isn't directly related to what you do. So it could be a book, it could be a mentor or whatever. You can take it wherever you like. But what's been that kind of like intellectual spark, really changed the way you saw the world, but wasn't necessarily directly about, for example, ESG or something like that?
I'm
looking for book recommendations is what this comes down to. I want to know what you're reading is how I feel about it.
So all my life, I have always read things like The Power of Positive Thinking or something like that. Today, when I get up in the morning, I listen to a broadcast by a guy named Darren Hardy, and he's just talking about how do you define success for yourself, and what would it look like, and what do you have to do to get it? And it's not it's not success defined by anybody else, or positivity defined by anybody else, or right. It's just how do I want to live my life? And I listen to 50% of them, I guess. I mean, some I just don't care about, some aren't material, some whatever. But I find that, and just I'm a very positive person generally. And did I have to read to get there? Probably not. But this is of the latest stuff. This has been, and it's bite size, right? That's also important. I love to read. I've been a voracious reader, but in terms of kind of really what's influencing my life today, I have to say, and it's not a plug, but I may try to turn it into one. If I could show him this, I want to get paid for it. But that's what does it take for me to put together the life that I want to lead? And so that's really what it's all about.
Well, thank you for that. That is certainly awesome. And I will make sure I look it up and link to it in the show notes as well. So for people who are interested in E3SG, interested in what you're doing, what are the best ways for them to either get started or reach out to you? Like, do they just go to e3sg.net and kind of contact you? Like, what would you give people as kind of a next step if they want to start incorporating this into their real estate investing or their development or whatever they're doing?
Well, I think that's a fine way to do it. And we're very interested in collaboration. Another thing that I did this morning was I started and found on LinkedIn that somebody I didn't know, though I knew his company. I don't even know what office he's in, but he had announced that he was working on a university collaboration for the appraisal process. And so we connected now to say we have value, which relates to, kind of everything, every score that we present. There is a value correlation to that. Let's connect on it. We think the definition of highest and best use, for example, it's time to revamp that a little bit. And that was part of our message to him today. So e3sg.net, yeah, please come and share with your thoughts and how to collaborate. And again, this connects to so many different things. Which way would you like to take it? Is there something about your property that you'd like to explore? Let's talk about that. Is there a fund? I mentioned that we're starting a fund. Is there an investment that you'd like to make? It goes to lots of different places, and all of it can be started through the E3SG webpage.
Yeah, so e3sg.net, I mentioned it before. That's the website. You can go there and check out Bob and everything he's doing. And I will say, Bob, I find what you guys are doing so fascinating and interesting. And I think it's very rare to find something that really shifts the way that you view an industry or the world, that also positively impacts the finances of a project and helps to make the world a better place. I mean, it literally is this really transformative idea that you guys have. So again, I want to thank you so much for coming on the show. Bob Greenlee, thank you so much, man. This was awesome.
Dan Barrett, it was a pleasure.
That is it. That's it for our interview this week. I hope you enjoyed it. I did. I learned a ton from Bob, and I bet you did too. Hey, by the way, all of my past episodes you can find at adwordsnerds.com/podcast. I'd love for you to go over there, check out the blog. We got all our past episodes, transcripts, all the show notes, and more. And of course, if you could leave me a review wherever you got this podcast, I would really appreciate it. It helps other people find the show. That's going to be it for this week's episode. I will see you next week. Thank you so much, and cheers.
This is thepodcastfactory.com.